Meeting of the Niles Main District Library, March 20th, 2024.
Thank you. Trustee Kadir?
Trustee Kadir will be tardy due to the Ramadan breaking of the fast and prayers, so he'll be here shortly.
Thank you. Trustee Derblick? Trustee Schoenfeld?
Here.
Treasurer Botello?
Present.
Secretary Rosansky? Here. Vice President Trunko?
Here.
And President Keene.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just before we get to the minutes, I'd like to remind everyone that as president of the board and as chair of the meetings, it's my job to run the meetings smoothly. And in order to facilitate that, I'd like to ask all trustees to do the following. Please do not speak unless recognized by the chair, that's myself. That recognition could be verbal or nonverbal, depending on the situation. Please only speak about topics on the agenda at the times they are being addressed. For example, during the director's report, it would not be appropriate to ask about a bill. Please show respect to your fellow trustees by refraining from interrupting them and/or raising your voices at each other. And lastly, be considerate of how long you speak. We don't currently have a policy on how long a trustee can speak, but it benefits all of us if we can keep the meeting moving. Thank you. And we can move on to approval of the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the February 21st, 2024 regular board meeting.
Any questions or comments on the minutes? Please take the roll, Margaret.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
Yes.
And President Keene?
Yes.
6-0 passes.
Thank you.
For public comment, our first comment is from Elliot Osherman.
Good evening, Board. This is Elliot Osherman. I start with my usual comments about addressing these comments to the entirety of the Board and that I expect your attention. And we'll begin with my non-declarative statements about the fact that I will neither be interrupted nor silenced, nor will we, nor will the community, that I will remember actions, as will we, as will the community, and that I will vote on or about April 1, 2025, as will we, as will the community. Subject: privileges and responsibilities of the board as a whole, of the officers of the board, and of staff in their relationship to the board, and the board in their relationship to the staff and community. I understand that the board will be meeting in April on the 13th with a parliamentarian for training purposes. I would like to pose the following questions and discussion topics for that meeting. Perhaps you can get better answers from the parliamentarian than I have been able to get in the past from the board. Item 1, the agenda. How does it get developed? Bylaws say it is by the executive director. Can the president single-handedly delete for consideration a proposed item? What if a majority of the board votes for inclusion of a particular topic? Can the president then not include it? Item 2, minutes. Are they supposed to be a summary of board actions? Can long speeches and reports be included verbatim? Should they be summarized? What if the speaker insists that remarks be included verbatim and protests the summary? Item 3, answering questions. Policy 3.27 specifically calls for the public to have the privilege of asking questions. It provides the presiding officer at the discretion of providing an answer. What if this procedure is abused by silence on the part of the presiding officer? What if the presiding officer insists that questions be submitted in writing and then ignores answering that question? Item 4, new business. What if the presiding officer consistently refuses to ask if there is any new business or claims there is no time at that particular meeting to raise new business? What if the presiding officer suggests that new business be treated as other? Item 5, procedures for calling for the order of the day and point of order. What if the presiding officer ignores these requests? What if she outright denies them without the board member being given an opportunity to describe the point? What should minutes reflect when calling for the order of the day or point of orders are raised, and how those requests were treated? Item 6, the current version of Robert's Rules of Order. What if the presiding officer claims that a point raised by the community, which should be addressed, is not in the current version that the library maintains? Thank you very much for bringing up these issues and questions to the parliamentarian. Good night.
Our second public comment was submitted in writing, and I will read it. It was submitted by Joe McCula. My comments pertain to the Niles Main Library final matrix report addressing library staffing and operations. A matrix is the medium or environment in which the future organizational structure of the library will be built. The original purpose of libraries was to be a source of books and information, and that is still the case. Today, most reference material and information is available on the internet, and this competition has drastically reduced library usage. Niles Main Library, rather than adjust with lower staff, have put staff to work producing programs, events, shows, and carnivals to give work to library staff no longer needed for the core mission of the library. Nowhere is the cost or results of any of these activities measured. This report is totally useless because it fails to measure the level and direction of patron usage of the library, which in turn justifies the level of staffing and operations, specifically the number of original borrowings of books, ebooks, DVDs, magazines, and other materials. This information is in library annual reports and monthly statistics and shows a continuous gradual decline of library usage. In order to see the direction the library is headed, we need to go back about 15 years, and it is evident the long-term trend is a continuous downward slope. The level of patron borrowings should be the basis for determining the staffing needs, yet this is never considered in this report nor any data or comparisons comparing staffing levels and patron usage at other libraries. This report focuses on arbitrarily created positions and the need to fill these positions and staff service desks, not whether they are needed at all. Nowhere does this report outline the processes and procedures currently in place at the Niles Main Library or measure their effectiveness, efficiency, or need. It also doesn't recommend any changes or improvements. In recent years, technological advances have been installed: automated check-in and sorting, electronic scanning on checkout, computers instead of maintaining card catalogs, self-checkout, all labor-saving advances. Also, importantly, most patrons serve themselves at the library and require no staff assistance. The report goes into great detail comparing Niles Main Library with other libraries, and those libraries get reports comparing themselves to Niles Main Library in a big circular pat on the back for mediocrity that tells us nothing of substance. There's also a patron and staff survey that tells us nothing of substance. Nowhere does this report measure the cost to borrow one item, how many items are not returned to the library, tasks that should be outsourced, the cost of maintaining the building in relation of selling and leasing it back without the exorbitant maintenance cost. The report fails to compare the large hoard of cash on hand and excessive capital reserve account to the level of other libraries. Another very important consideration not mentioned is the cost to borrow one item from the library. Is it more than the cost of that item itself? This appears to be an empty report full of details that fails to recognize and address the technological changes of previous library patrons currently receiving their reading and reference material on phones, tablets, iPads, and computers. Also not addressed is the low cost of cable and streaming options that have captured large numbers of former library DVD patrons. Current DVD borrowings are about 25% of what they were in the past. Big changes are needed at all libraries to downsize staff to current patron usage levels. This library matrix report is a waste of time and money and irrelevant in moving Niles Main Library into the future. And that is the last public comment.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve operating expenses of $173,370.23, payroll expenses of $277,495.62, special reserve expenses of $4,225, for a total monthly expense of $455,090.85.
Second.
Any questions or comments on the bills? Go ahead, Margaret.
Excuse me. Trustee Derblick? Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
Yes.
President Keene?
Yes.
6-0 passes.
Thank you. Roberto, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam President. The financial report through February 29th, 2024 includes beginning balance as of January 31st, 2023 was $13,374,185. Revenue includes property taxes at $773,447. Investment income, $40,006. Passports, $9,547. Book sales, $931. Others at $1,133. Combined total, $825,064. With expenditures, employee salaries came in at $282,404. Employee fringe benefit, employee fringe benefits, $51,538. Social Security, $20,576. Unemployment, $2,184. Subtotal there is $356,702. Operating expenses include library materials at $36,990. Library operating at $28,400. General and administration of library services is $20,620. Vehicle operations, $59. Utilities, $10,093. Building and equipment maintenance at $12,648. That subtotal came down to $108,810. At the end of February 29th, our balance sheet shows $13,707,017. Madam President, any questions?
I do not. Does anyone else have any questions?
No.
Just have one. Trustee Botello, can you explain other in a little more detail? The
With-
1,133?
Yes, with regards to revenue, our trustee packet includes this, a relatively long list of items. I did not itemize every single item there, but let me just find my paperwork here and I'll quickly tell you what those are. With regards, I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Sure. So with regards to revenue, included there are miscellaneous expenses, donations, flash drives, and earbud sales that occurred during this month. Pay-to-print cost, pay-to-print revenue that came in, lost book sales, some fines. And again, these are all items that have values behind them. But I just thought to group them together in one subtotal. Any other questions?
I understand. I wasn't sure that's what I thought, but I thought I better ask anyway. All right, thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions?
Thank you for being prepared.
Thank you.
Okay, Executive Director's Report.
So I have no additional things to add to the written report, but I'll just go through it quickly because it is fairly short. So the library has completed and submitted the Illinois State Library Illinet Interlibrary Loan and Reciprocal Borrowing Statistical Survey and the annual Illinois State Library certification as required by the Illinois State Library for our membership with RAILS. In response to patron comments and in line with other area libraries, we have reduced the cost of making color copies for patrons to 25 cents per page. The library will be joining season 4 of Illinois Libraries Present, which is a forum where there are different authors and presenters brought to several area libraries online. So it's programs where authors like Neil Gaiman will be presenting for all of our patrons. And we have been asked about this by several patrons, so we're really excited to join.
That's all online, correct?
That's all going to be online.
Thank you.
And I have hosted 3 meet and greet events with the public. And thank you for the trustees who were able to attend. I really appreciated your support. And thank you to the public for attending and giving us your feedback about how the library is doing. The overwhelming response has been positive. People really like the programs we're doing. They really like the services we offer. And I have gotten so many compliments on our staff and how they treat patrons and interact with everyone. So thank you to my staff as well. Working with our human resources manager, Cassandra, here, both of us have started a monthly professional development training series for our department heads and assistant department heads. The first topic we've covered so far is effective documentation for employee performance, and we have continued plans to keep that going for professional development purposes. And over the past month, I've had the pleasure of going to several of our large-scale events, including MakerFest, which was wonderful, the Battle of the Books ceremony, where we gave an award to the winning school who participated with us. I was there for an evening with Agata Isabella Brewer and for Lego Day. So many different varieties of programs, and again, I'm really proud of my staff and thankful to the public for attending. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the director? I don't have any questions either, but I did notice in, and I guess we can, in the director's report, the statistics are included. So one of the things that I noticed this time was that the users of staff-mediated spaces by location has gone up 40%, 40.54% over the last year. So, you know, in regards to people who think that the library doesn't need to have staff help the patrons, as we just heard in a comment, that is inaccurate according to the statistics that we have right in front of us. And if no one has anything else, we can move on to new business. Is there a motion? Or we don't need a motion for the first part? Yeah.
It's a presentation, so.
Valerie, would you like to introduce our guest, maybe?
So as part of new business, I would like to welcome our representative from the Matrix Consulting Group to do a presentation about the Matrix study.
Good evening, Alan Pennington with the Matrix Consulting Group. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm going to do a quick overview of the report so that you have plenty of time if you'd like to ask questions. But just to kind of set the stage, this was a request from the prior executive director who reached out and said, could we do a quick update of how we did with implementing the prior study that was conducted, take another look at staffing, and provide some general thoughts and oversight. So the assessment scope that we conducted did a sort of an overview of the operations, looking at how it aligns with industry best practices, which is typically defined as standards from the state of Illinois for library services and how you're comparing to other well-run library services. An employee survey, we wanted to make sure that there was significant employee input because we did not bid this at a thing that allowed us to interview every staff member. So we really wanted to make sure that we had that input in this. I would just say, given the timing, just so that in full disclosure, you were in the middle of negotiations during this time, so that may or may not have had an impact. I don't know, but I just want to note that the other things were occurring as this was going on. We did a community survey at the request of the prior executive director again. We expanded that pretty significantly from beyond what we originally proposed, so that it would time it so that you could put it out in your newsletter, distribute it out to every resident, and provide a much longer time period for response so that you would get hopefully a better response that might assist you in strategic planning in the future. So we did expand that quite a bit, and I think there's some good details in there. So there were questions that were added to that weren't necessary for us to look at what we were doing, but were to provide information to the Board of Trustees for your future use. And then we did a benchmarking and best practices assessment. I'm going to try to go through the survey stuff relatively quickly, although there's a lot in there. But I just want to kind of give you the key themes. From the employee survey, we had 54 responses. I think that's a good response rate, and that covered all the different divisions and departments of the library. Very high response regarding their perceptions of the quality and service levels provided to your residents. A strong desire from the staff to continue to look at ways to improve operations. High levels of agreement regarding the programming efforts, both the quality and diversity of the program. They felt they were doing very well in that area. Of the issues that were identified as more on the negative side, staffing levels was one that they raised significantly, being understaffed. The historic board relationship and internal work environment was raised as an issue. And the competitiveness of compensation and benefit levels. So lots of positives about the programs, the services, and other internal operations. The three negative, or most significantly negative areas, were staffing levels, internal work environment, and the board relationship. And I do say historic in there because that was part of what was shared with us, and the competitiveness of comp and benefits. I know comp and benefits are now, for a large portion of your workforce, negotiated, so that's a different thing than you would have been facing perhaps a year ago. But really good input in there, and I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance, I know there's a lot in there, to spend some time reading that. It's a snapshot in time. When we get to the recommendations, we do talk about doing that on basically an annual basis, so you can see how well you're progressing in terms of employee engagement, whether issues are diminishing or exacerbating. It's a great way to keep your pulse on the organization. From the community survey, a really great response, I think. We've done a lot of these, and we ended up with 754 responses. Just a few key things about the people who responded, because it does impact the result. 88% lived in the district, so you did have others who were weighing in that aren't residents. 91% of the respondents had at least one library card in their household. 43% almost were age 60 or older. So it does skew a little bit more on the senior ages than the youth ages. Less than 23% of the respondents were 40 or less. So just I want you to keep that in mind as you look at that and use that data. We can provide the full data set to you in Excel so you can slice and dice it, use it however you want. And 87% spoke English as a primary language in their household. So conversely, 13% don't have English as a primary language in their household. And I think that's important also to keep in mind in terms of the services that are provided. I won't go into a lot of details on each of these difference, but I just want to put a sense of how people are using the library, because it sort of drives some of the recommendations we're going to talk about later. About 60+% use the library monthly or more, have visited the library. So for these responses, that's the users you're hearing from. You're not hearing as much from those who infrequently use the library. And about a third of the respondents, not quite, but 30% are using it weekly. So you have very heavy users, and they're the principal respondents here. On the website, again, over 50% are using the website monthly, and again, almost 30% weekly. So that is a key component of how you're providing services to the public, both in person and from their home.
I I have a quick question on that. Do you have the data that shows what the percentage is of using it online on a website versus being in person?
I can't tell you where they accessed it. We just asked the question, do you use the,
Okay.
the website? We didn't ask them where they used it.
Got it. Okay.
We asked about how often they use some of the services that are offered, and we talked about those offered at the library building, home delivery, online services. And again, 50+% are on the monthly or weekly basis. So it's pretty consistent in terms of how and what types of things they're using. We had a question about how they find out about information about what's happening at the library. Emails from the library, so that's going to be users, the printed newsletter, the library website were the three top ways that you're engaging with your individuals. In many areas, printed newsletters have been in decline. They're not being used as much. That still seems to be a pretty effective way for you to reach your residents. They seem to, at least these respondents, seem to use that very well.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you.
Because in many places it's gone to almost it's just been cut. We then wanted to delve into a little bit more about the services used in the last 12 months. Greatest area was borrowing books and other materials, the traditional use of the library. DVDs, audiobooks, magazines, audiobooks aren't traditional, I guess, but I guess they are now. But almost 90% are, that's how they're using your services. But 31% are downloading stuff from the services you provide online. 40% attended a library program. I mean, 20% are using the rooms, 23% were using your computers. Almost 10% were asking for research or homework help. And you can see, the library, you know, they're reading the newspapers and magazines here. They're using the online databases. They're using the library as a space to work, study, or read. There's a variety of different needs out there. Makerspace, 12% utilization from this participation. But we wanted to get you a sense of how are people using it so you can focus in the future, where do we need to maybe put greater effort or less effort. We then specifically asked, why don't you use the service? Why might you not visit the library? 21% said they didn't need the services that were offered. So fair enough. 44% said they're too busy. So from that, you can say, all right, how do we look at when we're offering services or the frequency that we're doing it to maybe address that type of a constraint that your users have? I think some of the positive things in here is parking's not an issue. It's not hard to find what people are looking for. You know, only 6% said they didn't have a way to get here. Only 3% said they didn't have a card. So those traditional barriers don't seem to be there for the people who were responding to your survey. There were 12% that said the library hours are not convenient. So as you think about that in the future, that may be a point to dig a little deeper with some of them to, you know, see what might be better. About 17% said, you know, things that they're looking for aren't there. So there are additional services people are thinking about gathering from the library, but they're not finding here. So there are maybe additional opportunities to expand how you're doing it. So the greatest takeaways, if I can summarize the multiple of pages in there, really some really high satisfaction rates. Almost 66% rated as excellent. That's a pretty good response pattern. Adult collections had over 50% satisfaction. Interlibrary loan was rated as excellent by 56.5%. Some areas where the participants felt that there should be more priority was community engagement, senior programs, and technology training. Those are the three that all had over 50% indication you should be placing more priority. And you can see other ones in the report. Some areas where people felt there should be less priority, the makerspace, additional services being things like license tag renewal, yard waste, stickers, and programs in other languages. Those are the three that had the highest level of indication that there should be less priority, although it's low numbers. These are not high numbers, but we're trying to say, all right, if we ask the question, what were the 3 top answers? There you go. So getting to the key findings and recommendations, I guess, we group these into sort of 3 areas: staffing, operational, and services. There is a lot of comparative in there with the other entities, other organizations, so that you can see your structure is pretty well typical compared to most, with a couple exceptions. You don't have an assistant director, and we think that's important for the organization based upon what we heard and from interviews for succession planning. You had a period of time where there wasn't an executive director. It puts a pretty heavy burden on everyone else. I know you brought in a part-time person to help, but that's something we should be looking for. Since we did the original study, you've taken a different approach to financial management, where you no longer have the finance manager and you've outsourced a lot of the day-to-day. Nothing wrong with that. We just share that it is a little bit more unique. If you look deep in the comparative data, about half the libraries we did a deep dive in have sort of a dedicated finance function. The others have an approach similar to what you have. So it's not uncommon. It's just maybe not the more traditional approach. But generally what we found is the existing positions that you have really needed to be filled. So filling an assistant director, filling the facility supervisor and marketing supervisor positions, unless you're going to change the services that you provide. And I guess I probably should have reordered these a little bit. One of the key recommendations, and I know it's on the work plan, is to get a strategic plan developed. And I think that's something we heard from employees and others, is we need to have a unified vision of where we're going. Because quite frankly, you can't make key decisions about the services you're going to provide or the staffing model you're going to put in place until, as a group, you determine here's where we want to take the Niles Library District. That is the driving force, and I think that, of anything, should be one of the high priorities. But to maintain current operations using the existing facility and structure, we weren't coming in and saying if we redesign the whole library and make it more efficient, how could we reduce staff? But using sort of the current layout, the current service points, you need about 15.5 to 22 FTEs for coverage. 15 at the minimum, 22 at sort of that ideal coverage level. If the hours were increased, as we sort of recommend you should consider doing, that would increase slightly to about 17 and 24. So keeping sort of the same service points, the same approach. And it's a range being, on most desks, there was a desire to have, at ideal staffing, 2 positions there to cover the public. So we gave you a range. If you're at 1, here's the minimum you need, and at the 2, here's sort of that maximum you would need. Continue working on the activities you're doing to clarify the board and staff working relationship. It's not always easy. There are always going to be bumps in the road, but that's an important thing. And I mean, we heard it in the employee survey, that historic, and I think they were going back multiple years in some other references from the comments we heard, but that has an impact. And I think that's okay. It's part of your history, but you need to look at how do we, at least come together on what our mission is and our vision for the library, and then put that in place. We did make our recommendation here, and I do want to highlight this, is in comparison to some of the other districts and libraries, you probably have a higher percentage of your staff that are MLS, so Master of Library Sciences, than others. And we do encourage you, as you're looking at filling new positions, to take a hard look at whether that's an absolute requirement. So we're not denigrating that. It's a very prestigious level, and it's a high level of training, but it's not needed for every service point and every interaction with the public. And it is a higher level position and more costly. So making sure you have that where it's critical and best used, and not on positions that don't require it. We did recommend that you look at increasing the hours to 73 hours per week, sort of put you in line with sort of the average for other entities, and sort of more in alignment with Illinois standards, where in terms of typical number of hours, you're pretty close. It would require a little bit of adjustment, probably easiest on the weekend. But again, I think that's where you need to figure out what that small percentage of people who said the library hours aren't convenient, how do we address that? You can't go much later than 9 before you're getting, into not much usage. So it's looking at weekends or maybe opening time.
I can make a comment to that. A lot of the feedback I've gotten at my director meet and greets and just talking to people is that they really want us to reopen at 9 a.m. instead of 9:30 on certain days. So that would be somewhere where we could consider adjusting as well.
We did recommend that you look at it in your in your budgeting process, putting additional funds for professional development. That is something that on an ongoing basis is important, and not just for staff, but also for the board. I'm not saying you're not doing it, but attending conferences, spending time with other trustees and other directors and other professional staff at those are really good ways to understand some of the emerging trends and get a better handle on things that are happening in the library industry. We did suggest in response to a lot of the comments about the compensation, we had a preliminary recommendation there to look at doing a class and comp study. That may or may not be something that is still valid. I think it gives you a great external look on how well you're paying compared to others, but you may be doing that internally by developing the information that you need for collective bargaining also. So, and conducting an annual employee survey and periodic community surveys. I think two service areas, and while we weren't asked to do a comprehensive review of services, two things that kept coming out was how do we reach the people who aren't using us? And that came from staff as well as the public. And how do we address the more northern part of the district that is further removed from the physical library? And the trends are libraries still serve a lot of their traditional purposes, but they have expanded exponentially into a lot of different areas. So I think it's looking at how you're using your marketing to reach those people who aren't currently using it or using all of the services, and looking at some alternative service delivery models. That could be bookmobiles. That could be, there are many districts that are using book vending machines that we stock and we put them in different locations, different ways to engage with the public. Online services, and you do a lot of that, and your users are making great use of that. I would just caution you to keep in mind, the more you do the external outreach, the more you do the online services, your in-person numbers will drop. That is, and so you really need to make sure the data you're looking at in those monthly reports and as you're planning who you want to be, look at the total services you're providing, because not as many people come to the library as they used to. I'm a frequent user of my library services, but I haven't been in my library other than to renew my library card in 5 years. So you have to keep that in mind that it's changing, so there will be times where it may look like the hours are low, the usage per hour is low, and you say, well, if we take another hour off, we don't have to pay 10 staff members to be in the building. That's true. But look at the whole picture is all I'm saying, is it's continuing to expand and differentiate and change what people need. I mean, the makerspace wasn't here when we talked with you many years ago. I mean, that's something that has blossomed everywhere in different libraries, but 10 years ago, nobody had that. You're going to continue to change those things. I think the hardest part of your challenge is meeting the unmet need. Why aren't people coming in, and how do we deal with those with a fairly sizable non-English population as their primary language? And it's not only Polish. There's a whole variety of languages we need to handle, and it's really hard to provide all of your services in the languages that people need. That becomes a really conscious effort you have to make about how are we translating things, what programs do we put out in alternative languages, what types of books are we buying or magazines. So that's always going to be a real challenge there. With that, I'll stop. I probably went over my 15, 20 minutes. But I think if I could leave with one final key takeaway is there was a lot of positivity in both the employee and the community survey. There's a lot that everyone should be proud of in the organization, and there's a desire to see the library continue to grow and be better. I mean, I think there's a lot of support from that internally and from the residents. So, sure.
Thank you.
So if it's okay, can
Yes.
Thank
you.
Can you actually pull up your presentation again? Because I'd like to go to the page where it said what most people would like to see increased and decreased as well.
Yeah. Let me find it.
No worries.
I just got to figure out how we got it back up there. Because,
We're actually the Solstice Pod app,
yes. I just got to connect to you.
and the new number is 0202.
I'll leave it up this time.
I think it's page 49.
Oh, you want it in the report?
No.
Oh, this, okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
If you could just make that full screen, so that way I could.
I can.
Thank you.
Yes, so it's easier for us to read it. Thank you.
There you
Thank
go.
you. So, one of the things that pop out to me right away is the areas that indicated for less priority should be makerspace, because one thing that we hear a lot of, I know myself and other board members included as well as staff, is makerspace is one of those things that everybody wants more of and they want us to expand. So I guess I wonder, even though it's a low percentage, if we're going to take the other things, and I'm asking your suggestion because you do this for a living, we're going to take everything else into account on the top end. Should we be taking the bottom end on account also? Because at the end of the day, that's the most of what we've got out of this survey. So if they're saying 10.1% of the people are saying makerspace is less of a priority, should we not look to increase makerspace? Based off of your report, that's what that would say.
I think what I would say is it's a thing to discuss. Now, and I also wanted to point out that while you had great survey response, you may have also been the vast majority of the respondents may not be the primary users of the makerspace. And that's why, if 40, 50% of the respondents are over 60 and they're not the principal users, I'm not saying they're not.
Yeah.
But if they are not the principal users, they may not see the value there. So I think what I would say is, before taking action on these two areas where you add priority or reduce priority, you use that as a way during your strategic planning to further engage with your residents to say, here's what we heard from the survey. We need to understand this better. Because quite frankly, by age category, the majority of the respondents are seniors. What service do we want more of? Senior service.
Right.
Well, and that's even.
So I'm not saying they don't deserve more or there shouldn't be more, but it's a snapshot from who responded. And I think there's some great intelligence in there. There's a great thing. The other thing, and then why I offered to give you the full data set that we can download it, is you can do, we can further cross-tab this, and we can do this for you too, to say, all right, who said we should reduce makerspace? Was it one type of demographic?
Okay.
And so we could dig deep into the data to give you more actionable intelligence there.
Yeah, I think that would help because, technology training, again, most of our respondents were seniors. I know that if we had respondents, in the teens to early 20s, they probably don't need technology training from the library.
Right.
So I just don't want to make a jump off of any of
Right.
this, and I get nervous about seeing numbers like that
Yeah.
it becomes this. We need to take action on that because it's 50% or more versus we can't. If we're going to take action one way, you got to take action both ways.
I
So
think this is a jumping off point, is you use this as a point to say, here's what we heard from you. Now let's explore what that means and dig into the data a little bit deeper. Because technology training, if there's a need and it's seniors asking for it, might be different than technology training if you're talking about it for somebody in their 20s, because they may be asking for something completely different.
of course,
Right.
Yeah.
okay.
I think that, 768 respondents?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good number, but that doesn't represent 59,000 people in our district either. So while we had good input, I think the point that this is a guide for the strategic plan is really good. And of those respondents, I think we have to keep in mind too that none of them are going to be kids because kids don't have access to that. So kids and teens are probably not represented well, and those are people that are really excited about a makerspace kind of stuff too. But I think it's a good point to bring up.
My concern, my concern is,
you say the numbers below the age of 40 was not very high. And to me, people who have children, not all of them, but a lot of them would fall more into that category that would be using the youth department and stuff. So therefore, we would probably get better response pertaining to our youth department and everything else, but how do we reach out to them?
I mean, and I think that's why you just continue to do the outreach and continue to do these. I mean, this was part of, a mailing that went out to everyone. So, you did a great effort to try to get feedback. You just have, it's hard to get survey respondents. You just need to continue to ask for feedback and use it as a way of say, here's what we heard. Now, how do we dig into the data a little bit deeper? What can we do with this? That's where maybe you do some targeted stuff about people who are using it. The hardest group is the group that isn't coming in here. And that's, one thing that we could do and send it to you with the data is we could just show you the response rate for everyone who's not been in the library in the last year or said they don't have a library card. So you can look at the data and say, all right, what are they asking for or what would they want?
What would attract them?
Because that's the deep dive you have to do into this to get it actionable. Because the people who are in here all the time, who are using your services all the time, you probably are meeting their needs well. That's why they're here. It's the ones who aren't that you want to engage with.
Well, and I think that's exactly why, and not to put you on the spot, but I think that's exactly why Valerie was chosen as the executive director, is because of her forward thinking and outside the regular general programs. And I think that's a huge part of what we need to. I mean, you yourself just said you haven't been in your local library in 5 years, but you use the services all the time online. So it's one of those things. I know my daughter frequents the app every couple of days, let's just say, but she's not here every day because she doesn't have a ride here, things like that. So yeah, I think that's very important as well.
And that's where that strategic plan is to say, what do we want to be? What are we going to focus on? All these other things are going to cascade from that. And that's, it's sort of, it sounds trite, but it's sort of fundamental. Libraries are not what they used to be. They can be many different things, and you have to fashion what that is. It used to be all programming was done by, parks and recreation departments, and libraries just did a little bit here and there. And now they're really full service, different areas, engaging in a lot of ways, providing a lot of different services, trying to be a one-stop shop for people who are using it and convenient. And, that's great, but there's you can only do so much. So that you sort of have to set that focus and target area. And then it's a lot easier to make some of these other decisions. I mean, the big takeaway on staffing is you're not overstaffed, you're not really understaffed, you're sort of right there. You just have to define what services we're going to do to refine that further. And as I said, some opportunities to maybe better reallocate the type of positions to get some cost efficiencies in that.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. My question is in regards to the complete data set. And number one is I'm interested in knowing, would we as a board have independent access to the data set for us to review and interpret on our own, or do we need to consult with a representative from your company?
Well, you engage us to do this. The data set, we are more than happy to provide the raw data set to the district.
Okay.
Right, well, yeah, and then that's because, and the reason why I'm getting to this is because that comment that was made by the patron, the resident from the district, it's something that we've heard a lot, which is that across all libraries, and even this was included in your report, is that there's a significant decline in usage. And so your data set included 12 libraries, and so I'm interested in knowing too, similar to what the question was, which is how do we compare to the other libraries? And so if that's something that I can review on my own or as a board, so we can address that.
Yeah, quite frankly, we used data from the state that you provided to us. It's an annual state data report, you can dig as deep as you want, and you can look at all sorts of things. There's a wealth of data there.
Sure. And I don't mean this as a criticism, but I wonder too why the difference was not included. So you showed us our decline, but what was the decline at the other 11 libraries? That's, in order to address that concern that was raised, I would have felt better prepared to be able to address some of those concerns, because it's something that we've heard often, and it's a valid point.
Fair enough.
So, thank you. I look forward to reviewing the data. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Quick question. Were you the ones who did this survey for us before?
Yes.
How do we compare with the number who filled out the survey this time versus last time? Do you have that number?
I have to go back and look. I don't recall that we did a community survey last time.
I thought we did, but I thought our response was kind
Well,
of,
we did not put the effort into it. I know we didn't coordinate it to the level we did this time, where
Okay,
we held it
okay.
open much longer. You put it in your newsletter, so
Okay.
that it got mailed out to every household. I think it was a much more of a snapshot of, we had it available online on your website. I don't think it was distributed, but I can get that
To-
for you. I just don't remember. off the top
it
of my
doesn't
head.
matter. But I do remember there was public, but I didn't think the response was that great. That's why I just
Yeah,
asked.
I don't think it was.
I have the report if you want me to send you the copy of that.
Whatever makes you happy.
I have
President King?
I have two questions on this. One, the first question I'd like to know is, do you have the information regarding the budgets of all of the 11 libraries that we were compared to on this versus what our budget is?
Yeah, I think that's in the state data. It goes, I think that's all reported in there.
Okay, and then the second thing is, like Trustee Bertello just said, we may be seeing a decline also, but is our decline less rapid than other places? Is it more rapid than other places that we're compared to?
Or is it across the board?
Well, but
with
even if
other
it, no, even if
libraries?
even if it is across the board, are we at 10% and somebody else is, and everybody else is at 15 to 20%? Like, where do we rack for that? Because if we don't have that information, just saying that we're going down a lower trend, well, so is every other library. It's happening across the board.
Well, and I think that the only trend there that I was referencing, make sure I didn't misspeak, is in-person usage is typically trending downward. Total
Correct.
usage, depending on how you define usage, is trending upward in most areas, because the online services, the programming, these other things that weren't traditionally provided have grown as the in-person stuff has declined. So yeah, I think part of it is defining what is usage and how are you going to look at usage. But fair point, if their in-person usage is dropping faster than yours, that says something.
Correct, because
Yes.
our in-person usage may be going down, and yes, our online usage may be going up.
Right.
But again, what percentage of our online usage going up is, where do we stack up against these other 11 libraries as well? Because again, if we're at 15% and everybody else is 20 or 30%, well, what are we not offering that they are? And vice versa, of going downward as well. So that's valuable data that would have been helpful in this, for sure.
I personally feel some of the information gives us good jumping off points that we should have use for discussion to see what we personally as a board can help organize to meet some of the needs that came up during the survey. So thank you.
Trustee Derblick, did you have something?
Yes, I just have a couple points I wanted to make. Thank you, Alan, for
Sure.
being here this evening and for providing this study for the library. The study was lengthy and very detailed. I read it all through the entirety of it. I just have a couple of points I want to make. The matrix study used responses from the employee survey and the community survey as its basis for recommendations. The study also used resident population for their comparative study rather than actual patron visits, which have drastically declined over the years. You did allude to that, but I just want to make some points because I want to compare the factors. I noticed the study did not perform a much-needed staffing evaluation by department to identify staff to patron requirements and to determine staff scheduling. Also, the study did not perform an evaluation of current methods and processes by department for effectiveness and efficiency, providing recommendations for improvement along with job sharing possibilities. Our staff has been a very top priority and discussion for years, and those type of evaluations would really help us to get a better view and to utilize our staff to their capabilities and probably to their interest. And we haven't been doing that. But the study also addressed service points, and there's a couple things I wanted to bring out. The matrix chart indicated service points open for the entirety of the day have been impacted by a 70.8% decline in patron visits, and service point interactions are down 66%. This confirms the library's drastic decline in the past 5 years. Based on the 70.8% decline in patron visits and 66% decline in patron interactions, the matrix chart refutes the recommendation that 11 service points must be operated with 1 to 2 employees. The study did not track interactions by individual service points, hourly or daily, without an analysis of individual service point activity, whether staffed or automated. Staffing requirements cannot accurately be determined. Instead, the matrix study used a yearly total of patron interactions, which cannot substantiate staffing or increasing staffing levels. And then I just have some clarifications about comments that were made about staff. The assistant director, the facility supervisor, and the marketing supervisor positions are non-bargaining union positions and were not affected or vacant due to the hiring freeze. The assistant director position, requiring a specific skill set and experience, is critical to library operations. Succession planning, as well as external hires for a future administrative director, are options and part of a forthcoming discussion by the board. The facility supervisor and marketing supervisor positions are ongoing discussions. The matrix study omitted the Sickage accounting firm on the organizational chart. They're responsible for library finances, which replaced the finance manager position. And I just wanted to bring that out so everyone has a clearer picture of our structure. And then, considering the drastic decline of 70.8% in patron visits, the matrix recommendation to fill vacancies, increase staffing levels, or staff to library population is unjustified. I do agree the library must align staffing levels to address library visitors. And then also, due to the 70.8% decline in patron visits, the Niles Library currently presents overstaffing of its employees. Approximately 10% of library staff can be observed at patron-facing stations in the library, while 90% of current staff are not patron-facing but located behind closed doors in offices. Now, I believe that if we look more closely at staffing from these different aspects, we could utilize our staff much more effectively, and the library could prosper in many ways that I feel like we're overlooking. In conclusion, the study was extensive and detailed, but the study did not provide a much-needed staffing evaluation, as I had alluded to. And then also, considering the drastic decline in patron visits, the matrix recommendation, again, to fill all vacancies and staffing levels based on population, I feel is unjustified. But I do agree we should align our levels with library visitors. Going forward, the library should assess the risks and outcomes of the new ideas and suggestions in the matrix study before considering them. I'm not saying we shouldn't consider them, but we need to further assess a lot of the information that you provided. And you even mentioned in the study how these are options, but you need to consider the cost, and will it fizzle out in a couple of years after we've incurred costs. So I want to thank you again for this study, and I think there's a lot of valuable information in it.
Thank you for your comments and your points of view and information that you brought, Trustee Derblick. And thank you, Alan. I don't have any further questions. I don't know if anyone else does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to, for 9B? Sorry, yeah, let's catch up.
I'd like to make a motion to clarify the library's budget preparation process, discussion, and possible vote.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you for placing this on the agenda. I just wanted to bring back our budget process because I wanted to bring back an explanation of our budget process just to try to stay on track with how it's been coordinated in the past and get an opinion of the board as to what seems to be our direction going forward. The fiscal year budget review process occurs yearly. The budget information is compiled by the departments pertaining to the budget line items contained within various budget categories. Price quotes are obtained from vendors as needed and included in the budget review documents by the departments. The library budget is reviewed in its entirety as a whole document. Every line item has an impact on the entire budget and can also affect other line items. More importantly, line items viewed collectively provide a wider view of information to make informed decisions, which could also include additions or revisions. In the past, if a contract was ending before the budget review process, the library would contact the vendor for an extension. The vendor would also provide the new fiscal year contract for the board review during the budget review process. For staff to decide to purchase individual line items rather than preparing for the department budget review process is questionable for many reasons. I encourage the board to continue to view the budget as a whole during the budget review process, allowing trustees a more in-depth look at all the line items.
President Kane,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to table this item until we get to the budget process in a couple of months. So can I have a motion to table this until we get to the budget process?
Second it.
Okay.
We need to vote on this, don't we?
Yes, Margaret, when you're ready.
Trustee Derblick?
No.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
No.
Treasurer Batello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
Yes.
President Keane?
Yes.
4-2 passes.
I'd like to make a motion for discussion and possible vote on the library's vendor selection procedures.
Was that your total motion before I seconded
That's
it?
it, yeah, that's it.
Okay, second.
It's nice, it's not long-winded, that one.
Well, never mind, I won't say what I'm thinking.
So President Keane, if I may address.
Yep, thank you.
I asked for this to be put on the agenda tonight. We have the next item on our new business is the motion to approve landscaping services. So the reason why I put this on is we have a process right now that not everybody knows when something's going out to public or out to bid or things of that nature. And the current process procedure to me isn't a full transparency thing to the public. I would rather see us create a spot on our website where we put this out I know you reached out to the Village of Niles, so did I. So I know when I put my name for my services of my personal business, I submitted my name, my card, my business, and when it came time due, I got a letter in the mail plus an email stating, hey, this is going out to bid, this is when it closes, this is what's required. There was no other questions that I could ask. There was nobody I could pick up the phone and actually get a phone call with because that was their policy and procedure. I know a landscaping company, an owner personally, I coach his kid in baseball, and he had no idea that we were out for bid. So I feel that we need to be a little bit more transparent, not just with landscaping, but in general. We put it out there. We may get other bids that we have no idea about, and we may be able to save the library money, or we may not be able to. But I think the process comes into place that we need to really be more transparent with. And I'm not saying anybody on staff is doing a bad job doing it. I'm just interested in transparency, that's all.
Can I make a comment?
Trustee,
Or can-
Director Marshall was ready
you
to
like
say
to?
something,
Go
and then
ahead.
we'll.
Okay. Just for the public who may not have read this in the packet, to clarify our current procedures and just to clarify the difference between items that go out to bid versus projects that fall below the legal bid requirements. Legally, bid requirements are any projects at or above $25,000 in a fiscal year. And for projects that do not cost that much, but are at or above $5,000 per the library's bylaws, the current procedures, which is not a policy in place right now approved by the board, but the procedures that have been followed for a long time are that the library obtains a minimum of 3 quotes whenever possible from vendors that the library either has an established relationship with, vendors whose quality of work is recommended by other libraries or municipalities, and vendors who have contacted the library seeking the library's business. We do keep track of those as far as keeping spreadsheets, or the department head who would lead that project keeps track in different ways based on how we're contacted. And there is a sample policy in the packet from the Naperville Public Library that details how they do these things. And as you mentioned, Vice President Trunco, the Village of Niles also follows a similar policy to what I outlined and what's outlined for the Naperville Public Library, in that because our projects, again, are under the legal bid amount, we use a little bit of flexibility for choice, but it does not necessarily mean that we are not transparent, in my opinion. I understand the request to potentially put something online to have people be able to reach out to us and contact us either via email or a different type of process. And I encourage the board to potentially consider putting a policy in place like what's outlined for the Naperville Public Library. I just want to also state that we get emails and cold calls from vendors a lot of the time, and the more we put this out to the public, which I understand the need for transparency, potentially the more need for staff we would have in order to address these requests to participate in these projects. Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation.
Trustee Derblick?
yes, I had a couple points. As far as the number of quotes, it has always been my procedure that we had to have 3 quotes. I know for a time we were receiving 1 or 2, and usually the only time that's acceptable is when the the vendor is specific to whatever, like it's a certain line or a certain manufacturer that you must utilize. But we've always asked for 3 quotes. And then secondly, as far as the process, I have to agree with Trustee Trunco requesting putting it online, because I don't see the benefit for the library to continuously use the same vendors over and over again. We should at least take the time to open it up and see how much more beneficial not necessarily bids, but more quotes would be for the library. The fact that we keep using the same person over and over again, I'm not so sure that we should continue in that direction. I mean, price is a consideration and so many other things. I understand that if you've worked on our boiler or whatever for several years, you're more experienced. But today, that experience is pretty broad ranged. So I still think that we shouldn't narrow it down to just having an employee contact specific individuals that he may know. I think we need to be, and as far as transparency goes, it really would be resolved if it's publicized. And it doesn't cost us anything to place it on the website. But secondly, the reason I brought up this explanation of the budget process, the landscaping maintenance agreement really should have been scheduled to fall within the budget review process. Instead of us taking the time to talk about it now and having staff take the time to have to follow whatever process we're following at the moment to get bids. And in the past, when we did discuss landscaping during a budget process, we realized the difficulty with having snow removal handled by our staff. And during that conversation, that's when we elected to consider having snow removal. So what I'm trying to say is, in the budget process, when everyone's looking at the entire budget and all 80, 90 line items, these suggestions come up. And if we start piecemealing and we buy this month and buy something another month, we're eliminating those opportunities for us to look at the budget more
Can we
in-depth
please
to
keep on
make
track,
decisions.
Trustee Derblick, and go back to the topic at hand?
So that's why I asked to have, this was the reason I wanted to discuss the budget, because I felt.
we're not
when I
discussing the budget right now.
suggested- The reason why I brought up the budget process was because I had suggested that if this landscaping contract is coming due before the budget process, that I suggested we contact the vendor and just extend it to the budget review process and then go for another year, so that everything would be lined up and discussed at one time. So those were the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Yeah, Director.
Treasurer Botello, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to share with the board conversations that I've had with residents and people within the community with regards to conducting business with the library. I've had several trades express a desire to have knowledge about work that's needed to be done here, and them having access to the information so they could submit bids. And specifically, on several of those instances where these individuals had mentioned to me, does the board give consideration to resident, meaning businesses that are within the district? So that's something that potentially we could discuss. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Director Marshall?
I know that we'll be talking about the landscaping contract shortly, but in response to comments made by Trustee Derblick, I just wanted to clarify that my understanding is that the landscaping contract was already in the budget for this fiscal year and was reviewed during the budgeting process, as well as in my experience at most libraries, while we do have general quotes for line items and contractors and projects that we will be working with throughout the budget year, it is very honestly inefficient to get quotes for every single thing at one time during the year. It makes the process very cumbersome. And depending upon when you actually need to sign up and utilize for the contract throughout the fiscal year, the prices can change. So we have to go through that process again to get quotes at the appropriate time. So that's my experience and my understanding at other libraries of how that works, that we have during the budget is a working budget, but we do not do contracts, all of them at the exact same time as the budget, because it would make the budgeting process very difficult to complete accurately. As long as we have an accurate estimate of what that may cost by looking into previous year costs and by talking to vendors as much as we can throughout that process, the actual budget and approval of contracts throughout the year when they come up is what's presented to the board when it's at or above $5,000, and is what's considered by myself and the department heads if it's under $5,000. So just to clarify that process as I understand it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Can I just
I
ask a
appreciate that.
question?
However, that's the budget process, and I'd really like to focus on what we were talking about here with the purchasing policy. If we get back on topic with that, I think, when Trustee Bertello brought up something that, again, like that I have echoed, is that people don't know. And we need people to know, because we need to, as a board, it's our job to make sure that the due diligence is done to the max. I'm not saying it's not being done at all, but when we have other people, especially local community owners of businesses, that aren't getting a shot because they have no idea, I believe that's something we really need to look into. So originally, this was a discussion and possible vote. President Keene, I don't think we need to take a vote. I think we need to look at
I don't
the
either.
purchasing policy and maybe put something in place coming off of this Naperville one. I like this one a lot. So maybe either we could work together, or if you want to present something to us maybe next month, so that way we could start getting a process done. I think that would be the best.
Thank you. Trustee Rosansky, you've kind of been waiting to say something, or are you good?
No. Just, I don't see the necessity of a vote for this either. We need to get more information and more ideas of how to possibly, if we are going to, establish this.
I think, Director Marshall, if you could prepare something for us next month, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Can I
Absolutely.
Director Marshall, could you, once you create this, do you think we can get it a little sooner than a few days? Just so if maybe we want to add to it or have a conversation with you. I feel like when we're in a board meeting, there's not enough time to notice what's missing and what have you. But I don't want to tax your time either. So you are going to create a purchasing policy that we will finalize at the next board meeting? And the conversation we just had, the comments we've made, will all be part of it. Is that what I can assume?
Yes, I'll make a draft as soon as possible. I'll happily send it out to the board for consideration, but it would be based on the one that's also included in the packet, from what I understand that the board is asking. So it will be very similar to this. And I will make recommendations as far as trying to become more transparent and putting something on our website as well, and look up models for that from other libraries for what they have. And is that my understanding of the board's direction?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you. Very good, thank you. 9D, is there a motion to approve the appointment of and payment to Flex?
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of and the payment of to Flex in the amount of $7,450 for 2024 and $7,950 for 2025 respectively for seasonal landscaping maintenance services.
Second.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I'd actually like to amend the motion, President Keene.
Okay.
Based off of what we're looking at with looking into a new process, I'd like to amend the motion to approve the appointment and payment up to Flex in the amount of $7,450 for 2024, giving them a one-year contract with the library to get us to the next point where we could get this done, but not for the 2 years.
Is there a second? Do we need a second? for the amendment? Okay.
Suzanne, you seconded? Yes? Thank you.
Any questions?
I know there's a motion,
And amended.
an amended motion on the table, but I have a comment. Since we just discussed that we wanted to advertise on the website, was that done for this particular?
No, but since we're not going to have the process in place and we need landscaping, what I'm amending the motion is to approve it for the 1 year, so we have somebody in place for this year, and then we could make adjustments as a board within purchasing procedure and potentially when we start the landscaping contract as well.
When does this contract end?
Richard?
So it starts April 22nd and goes for 28 weeks of service.
So it's April, so it's only, so next month the contract we're in now will end. So that's why,
No, the contract ended in November. It's
Contract's not a year, it's seasonal, so it's just during the growing season of April through November, every year. Starts this April.
So
Just
if we
to make
want them
sure
to
this
take
is,
care of our
I
stuff in
see.
April, then we need to.
I understand. Okay, thank you for that.
just to make sure this is,
Two or three.
can you get it to a mic?
Sorry.
Sorry, for the public.
Yeah, the only reason I asked for 2 and 3 was to see if we could lock in a better price, so.
Of course, yeah, I
no
completely
problem.
understand. But if we're going to change the policy and the procedure of how we're doing
Makes
it,
perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
thank you, Rich, for all the
Right,
explanation.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for a vote then? Oh, yes, Director Marshall.
I just, for the record of the recording, what Rich said, who is our head of facilities right now, is that the contract runs April through November, which is in the packet, but just so everyone has record of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Margaret, when you're ready.
So this is for the amended motion.
That's what it's for.
Trustee Derblick?
Yes.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
Yes.
President Keene?
Yes,
6-0 passes.
thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the expenditure not to exceed $24,463 for the purchase of display furniture and shelving parts from Library Furniture International, Inc., LFI, with an authorized impress check for the required 50% deposit.
Second.
I have a question regarding this particular purchase. This was in the budget of last year's?
This
year's?
year.
So this is a current year budget approval?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, Margaret?
Trustee Derblick?
Yes.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunko?
Yes.
President Keene?
Yes.
6-0 passes.
I'd like to make a motion to rescind the Niles Main District Library trustee manual.
Second it.
Okay, would anyone like to make a comment?
I would actually like to amend this motion as well. I'd like to make a motion to rescind the Niles Main District Library trustee manual within 90 days of the approved date. And if we don't have it done by then, the trustee manual will go back into effect. If we don't have the amended bylaws and things of that nature done in the next 90 days, then
Realistically, are we going to be able to get them all?
well, we have to be able to take some of this stuff in the trustee manual does have to be put into place. We do need to disregard the current trustee manual, so I don't know if it has to be modified or something, some sort of modification in the next 90 days to make it at least working until we could finish all the bylaws.
Can you repeat the amended motion?
Yeah, good luck. All of that. So a motion to rescind the Niles Main District Library trustee manual with an agreement that in the next 90 days, we either have an updated bylaw or updated trustee working manual. Because there are, and now this is just for a conversation, there are a few things in the trustee manual that we do need to have in place. And while I'm okay taking it out for right now, I want to make sure that we keep some of those things in place. And the reason that I asked for this to be on the agenda today was some of the things that are on there directly conflict with our current bylaws.
True.
So it's making staff, Director Marshall's job, impossible in certain areas. And I don't think that's fair to our director. I don't think that's fair to our staff. So I want to give it a shot that we change that, but we also make sure that we cover what we need as a library board and as staff as well in there.
Before I second this, amended motion. I would like to make sure that Margaret has it written down in a way that he approves.
All right.
But I have a question also.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion.
We don't even have a second yet, so we
Right.
do need to at least
Okay.
second. I'm sorry, just before we continue
For
the
the
conversation.
motion, I
Okay,
have
go
a suggestion for the
go
motion.
ahead.
Instead of rescind within 90 days, my suggestion is suspend for 90 days
Perfect.
the use of the manual until and unless the bylaws or the manual are updated by board approval.
I'm totally fine with that.
I have a question.
Second.
Yeah, hold on.
Can I
I
ask a
shouldn't be
question?
seconding?
I have a question also.
Go ahead.
Just to make sure I understand how this would work then, if we suspend the manual for 90 days, during those 90 days, that means
What?
the committee has to meet about the bylaws and then bring that back to the board for approval and a vote. So that really gives us only one meeting. Actually only gives the committee who's going to work on the bylaws until the next month's meeting to have the board vote on it at that time, because then the 90
Yeah,
90
it's
days
kinda
is, well,
quick.
that's 3 months.
No,
90
we would
days
have,
is
yeah,
3
we would
months.
have to June.
Okay.
Okay.
So that gives us a little bit of time. And then we could, if, as long as we start working on it and we start getting it in place, I think we could start putting those things in place. And then we could terminate it completely, rescind it completely. But just to make sure that we give ourselves a little bit of a deadline, because there are certain things in there that really need to come back into play.
Okay. My question is, do we have a committee to do this?
That's coming up.
It's coming up, and yes,
Here's,
later in the
here's,
meeting.
here's the other question, President Keene. Do we even want to keep a trustee manual, or we just want to make it bylaws? That's the better, if we just want to go with bylaws, I guess that's a board conversation, which I'm okay with also. To me, our bylaw, and Dennis is here, so let's
Right.
use Dennis's brain. The trustee manual gets superseded by our bylaws, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so having a trustee manual in place, it's nice to have a trustee manual for guidelines and things, but if it's gonna just basically repeat what's in the bylaws, do we actually need it?
No,
I don't
is
think
the
we-
answer.
Okay. Then I would
And
like
To
to-
the extent that it's, to the extent that it contradicts the bylaws prevail.
Okay, then I'd like to actually withdraw, I'd like to withdraw my amended motion and stick to the original motion then.
Trustee Derblick, you were trying to say something?
Yes, my question was going to be, if we suspend this, then what are we going to be following? So what I just heard
bylaws.
is the
Bylaws.
bylaws supersede, and
Which we all knew.
we'll go from there. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you withdraw your.
I do. I withdraw my
Okay,
amended
So we will be
motion.
voting on the original.
Withdraw the second.
Oh, you need to withdraw your second.
I withdraw it and
you.
go back to my original second. See, I should wait until
I
he's
would
all
like
done
to
talking, right?
Thank you for bringing this up, Vice President Trunko, because it is very conflicting with the bylaws, and
Oh,
it allows
definitely.
for some things in here that go in complete disagreement with the trustee manual that we should, not the trustee manual, sorry, the trustee, I think it's the fact file, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Marshall, that says, trustees shouldn't be involved in detailed conversations with staff, and that that's what it says in the trustee manual, and that's not best practices for library trustees. So thank you for bringing this up. I'm hoping that it will make everyone's life a lot easier. The board, just has to follow one thing, the bylaws, and the staff will also be hopefully easier for them as well, so.
I have a comment, President Keene. While the, what's that document? The trustee, I'm sorry, what document did you just reference? It's
The trustee fact
standards?
file.
Standards and public.
Fact file.
The fact file, okay. Though that document is a document of recommendations, it's not necessarily.
Right, it's like best practices.
It's still not a law. I think we need to be careful here. Apparently, it sounds like the issue for eliminating the trustee manual is a discrepancy between trustees having conversations with our staff. I think we
No,
need-
it's not just that. There's
No, if
multiple.
I can just address what trustee President Keene just said. And while, yes, that's been a comment that's been bounced around quite some time, but I don't think that an elected official can be muzzled or restricted to be in the library and talk to staff. So we're going to, it's still going to cause some controversy.
Well, the reason why I wanted to rescind this is there's a lot of conflicting things between our bylaws. Even just for an example, if you go look at our bylaws and you look at the trustee manual, just how the agenda has to go, it's not even in the same order in our bylaws and our trustee manual. There's also when the board packet has to be ready for us. One says Friday, one says Saturday. So there's a lot of conflicting information in them. So if the bylaws are going to supersede it anyway, then let's get rid of the manual. Let's do a review of our bylaws and get the things in there and the bylaws that we need to have in there. Let's present it to the board and let's get that set up. So that way it's not, I don't think it's fair for Director Marshall to be getting phone calls that we don't have our board packets on Friday, but the bylaws say Saturday, and then we're having her get beat up because somebody didn't get it on Friday. She's going by the most legal document we have, which is Saturday. She shouldn't, first of all, she shouldn't be getting beat up by anybody on this board.
True.
Second of all, if she's following things to the letter of the law, then that's what's the most important thing for me.
And I'm not disputing that at all. All I'm trying to say is while there are some considerations to eliminate this and eliminate that, I'm just trying to say, based on Illinois statutes, elected officials, I don't know if everything you're trying to accomplish is going to be accomplished. And it's unfortunate that our new director is being verbally abused over when she delivers packets. Unfortunately,
Or at all, exactly.
Unfortunately, I guess best practice, at least for the past 2 years, was the packets are delivered on Friday to make sure there was ample time to review them. And of course, if that's a problem, the bylaws being different would supersede it. But I'm not sure that makes the situation better or worse.
So when
but
we
just back to my point, you can rescind or suspend whatever you want, but the statutes will still apply, and you still can't prevent trustees from actively participating in the library or speaking to staff.
I think that if we speak, I was here multiple times. I think in the last month we could all agree. I know because I've talked to Cassandra multiple times and Director Marshall. I have no problem walking up to, let's say, Rich and having a conversation with Rich. I think it's how we have those conversations. I ask Rich a question, I get a professional answer from Rich. I respect Rich. I have the utmost respect for anybody I speak to in this library because this is their job and I'm coming into their place of work and I shouldn't make it a hostile work environment for anybody. So I think that if we have the proper conversations and avoid criticism and go with the facts that you're just trying to get information, I think you wouldn't have a problem. If we have criticisms
I
of
agree.
things, if we have criticisms or we have things that are concerns for us, that's why we do have an executive director. That's why we do have an HR manager, and at some point we'll have an assistant director as well that will help facilitate that and work it. Because I know for myself, I don't have the time to be here 40 hours a week to do that, and that's what we have people in place for, and that's why we hired those people. So
We're not supposed to micromanage. We are oversight. Not only that, but there's a difference. We have policy and we have bylaws, and the attorney can address this. Bylaws, you need to have 5 votes to change it. And I don't remember if you need 5 votes to pass them. That would be something the attorney would know. Policy, it's just a simple majority. So therefore, that is something we have to consider when we're doing these adjustments also. Do we want it as policy or do we want it as bylaw? The insurance of it being bylaw is it takes 5 votes to remove it.
Thank you. So, I mean, to the point of speaking with the staff, when we address the bylaws, yeah, we can't put in a law that says a trustee cannot speak to staff, but it is more important to remember how we treat staff and not raise our voices at them, or go into their offices and ask for keys and interrogate them when we're not supposed to. It's all about having a relationship and being respectful with each other, and that's where we should start. And we can also build in things to the bylaws, such as having the packets on Friday if that's what the board wants. So I think rescinding this manual that is contradictory to the bylaws is a very good idea. Margaret, please take the roll. And Trustee Kadir is here to vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we are going to vote on the original motion, which is, let's see, Trustee Trunco or Vice President Trunco moved or motioned to rescind the Niles Main District Library Trustee Manual. Okay? And Trustee Kadir, how do you vote?
Just want to make a comment before my vote, though I wasn't here for a lot of the discussion. I did have, a view of the considerations that are involved, and I am going to vote on this issue, and I'm going to vote that yes, we rescind.
Thank you. Trustee Derblick?
I'm going to vote no.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
No.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Vice President Trunco?
Yes.
President Keene?
Yes.
5-2 passes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to discuss board committees. Don't know if I. need
Oh,
to make a
yeah, I just
motion.
have a quick update. Yeah, so the union actually waived the request for the insurance committee, so we don't need to make a committee for that. And no progress has been made towards an insurance committee either, so we don't currently have a need for that. But we are going to be beginning with a bylaws and policy review committee, especially now that we have rescinded the trustee manual. And that committee will consist of Director Marshall, Vice President Trunco, and myself.
Okay.
And that is the update on the committees. So we don't foresee having any others in the near future, but maybe later in the year.
So at this point, no other union committees or anything else at this point? Okay.
Right.
And that's cool.
Perfect.
As long as there's 2 people from the board on it, that's cool.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to make a motion, oh boy, to read all this, to go into executive session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee or employees of the Niles Main District Library, 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and collective negotiation matters between the Niles Main District Library and its employees or their representatives, 5 ILCS 122C2.
Second.
Oh, you quit.
Okay, let me take the vote. Trustee Kadir?
Yes.
Trustee Derblick?
Yes.
Trustee Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Treasurer Botello?
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice President Trunco?
Yes.
President Keene?
Thank you.
7-0.
It's 8:38.
So we're going upstairs?
Sure.
Go ahead, Jason. Rich is ready.
I'd like to make a motion to go back into open session.
I second.
Okay. Roll call. Trustee Kadir.
Here.
Trustee Derblick.
Present.
Trustee Schoenfeld. Treasurer Botello is
Left.
absent. Secretary Rosansky.
Here.
Vice President Trunko.
Here.
President Keen.
Here.
I apologize, I don't have a watch with me. What time are we resuming? 10:39.
She's got the clock.
All right, coming out of executive session, I would like to make a motion to accept the delegation of authority to the executive director with grammatical changes as needed, and the change on the last page from 10% to 3% as long as within the salary range as discussed in executive session.
I second.
I have a question. Weren't there a few more items?
There were a few more items, but that's all that we had a consensus on upstairs. There was not more than 3 people upstairs that,
No, I thought there was a discussion about contacting a financial advisor,
but that's,
not part of this?
that's not part of this, no.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure we
Yeah,
didn't
and
exclude it.
we're accepting this as a working document, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it can be further revised.
Yes.
Going forward as we further discuss.
As
it.
needed.
Yeah.
Isn't
So-
that true of every policy?
Yes.
Yeah,
Usually.
But we want to make it explicit on this one.
Okay.
Just, so that we're not closing the door to, it's not like we just discussed everything and completely closed the door to anything.
Sure.
Okay,
Okay,
so the motion's there.
I second the motion.
perfect. So roll call again. Trustee Kadir.
Yes.
Trustee Derblick.
I'm going to have to vote no because I haven't actually been able to go through it, the entire document with changes.
Trustee Schoenfeld.
No.
Secretary Rosansky.
Yes.
Vice President Trunko.
Yes.
President Keen.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Thank you.
And then, I guess, since Trustee Driblick brought it up, we don't need to vote on getting a third quote for a financial advisor because it falls under the $5,000 limit.
Right.
So we don't actually need to do anything for that.
So the request was just for a third quote, not for,
Correct. And we
For
don't
a
have
financial advisor.
We haven't put that new policy in place of how we're going to solicit bids. So at this point, we're just going status quo, and it's under 5,000, which is well within her guidelines to do something without coming to us.
And we already have 2, correct?
We do.
We have
just
two,
need to
and
have a third so
and
that we
bu-
can choose the.
and the budget's there. So
And the only reason that was even discussed was our director was asking for advice on how she should conduct her business, and that fell into our discussion.
okay. Which is covered under performance in executive session.
Yes.
And so we are on to.
Other.
Other.
Dare I ask? Anyone have other?
There is no other.
No, I have a very quick other. I do want to commend our staff. Without getting into details, we had a situation, but our staff handled it phenomenally in the last 24 hours, or 36 hours at this point. So I really appreciate the staff and all that they do, and I really appreciate walking around here a lot this month. I was here for a few meetings, and everybody's smiling faces and everybody greeting me, and it's really nice to come in and see that everybody's a little bit more relaxed than they were a year ago. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
like to make a motion to adjourn?
I do have one other.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. And it's quick. I just wanted to say how much I'm looking forward to the trustee training that is coming up on April 20th. I think I heard someone say that it was the 13th today, but it's not. It's actually on Saturday, April 20th. And I encourage all board members, it's not, we can't make it a requirement, but I encourage all of you to attend. Whether you've been a trustee for a year or a decade, there's always something more to learn. We have a very well-known expert coming who's going to offer us all kinds of new things, and I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you for setting that up, and I hope we can all make it.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
President Keene, can I
Oh.
just throw in a question? Have we determined if the, that session is going to be recorded? So if we can't make it, we can view it later?
We have determined that has been made known that yes, the answer is yes.
Oh, it will be recorded?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, great. I mean, I'll still try to get there, but thank you.
All right, I'll try this one more time. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the March library meeting at 10:45 p.m.
I
Second.
I third.
Okay, so Patty is second.
Patty gets,
I was waiting because I knew he was getting ready. And,
Okay, so roll call. Trustee Kadir,
Yes.
Trustee Derblick, Trustee Schoenfeld, Secretary Rosansky,
yes.
Vice President Trunco,
yes.
President Keene.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
One of these days I'm going to vote
Richard?
no.